7 years ago, my 62-year-old husband, Mike, got lost going to Home Depot, even though he had a GPS at the time. He was having some trouble with words. He was kicking in his sleep. Shortly after that, started talking about the ghosts he would see during the night. What I didn't know was that his personality was about to change. He had been called Polar Bear when I met him at 19. We slept with the window wide open even when it was snowing. Now he likes it 74 and he's able to have an Afghan covering him. In the car, if we go over a bump, he was able to verbalize early on that the bumps hurt him. His elbow would slam against the door. His head would hit the top of the car. On days he was more confused, the bumps hurt more. If I would swerve to avoid a bump, he would say, "You lost control," and he would brace for impact. And you also have to keep the temperature in the car perfect, otherwise he will have a meltdown. His worst symptom was the rage. He was the most easygoing guy, and all of a sudden he was picking fights over little minor things, and sometimes he would just be glaring at me like he was furious, and I would say to him, "What are you angry about?" And he would say, "I'm not angry." When he directed that rage to our daughter, she insisted we had to get him help. There was something really wrong. Things that drive me crazy as a caregiver. The number one is showtime. Showtime is their ability to appear perfectly normal, and you are the only one seeing the symptoms. So early on, I would say to my daughter, "Can you take him to lunch, give me the grandkids, and you guys, just tell me what you see." And she would always come home and say, "He was fine. I just don't see it, Mom." She saw all the bracing for impact and not knowing how to get back home and things like that. But most of what I saw, she did not see until about a year and a half ago. And they went out to lunch together. And that night I didn't hear from her. I finally called her and she said she cried the whole way home. She couldn't understand one word he had said. We had a treadmill in our cottage, and I turned around. He's walking on the treadmill backwards. I immediately shut it off and got the treadmill taken out of the cottage. One morning we're sitting on the patio. He says to me, "What does it mean when one leg is heavier than the other?" I go, "Mike, it's a sign of stroke. Is it happening now?" "No, it was about 2 weeks ago." When we were moving to EdenHill 2 years ago, which was the best thing that we ever did, he would tell people when they would ask, "Why are you moving?" He would say, "My wife has a lot of problems." We play scavenger hunt a lot. He likes to reorganize things. He spends hours reorganizing things. And then he will say, "Do you know where my belt is?" And I'll say, "I don't know, Mike. Where was it the last time you saw it?" "You had it." Every time. I have to do his pills because he cannot see. Whenever he has a stomach ache, he'll say, "I know you're poisoning me." 4 years ago, he had had his MRI and we knew he was deteriorating. We were doing crash courses on everything I needed to do to be able to handle things. And so he was showing me Quicken. And our lesson went on for maybe an hour and a half, and he had no patience. He was at the point where he would change passwords and not write them down, things like that. So we finished our lesson. I said, "I need a glass of wine." And I go out, had to open a new bottle, and I use the automatic wine opener, and the cork gets caught in the top of the automatic wine opener. And I started to cry. I said, "I don't want to do all of this on my own." And he looked at me, he said, "Quit acting like I'm dying." He said, "Let me remind you, you have a disease too." I've had type 1 diabetes 44 years. He said, "Sweetheart, I'm planning on going to your funeral." It was the perfect thing to hear in that moment. Just knock off all the whining and worrying and live for today. Applying that to today, I need to plan for our future. He forgot my name a year ago. He loses more cognitively. Just every day, I see another loss. We are married 48 years. By 50 years, for our anniversary in 2 years from now, he won't know who I am. He may not be here, So we went out and celebrated 50 years from when our first date was, and we got a cute selfie. You have to live for today. He'll say, "You never do anything for me. I am his villain." He is not my villain. Alzheimer's is my villain because she stole my husband. You have to prepare everything, your medical and legal power of attorneys. Make sure you go see an elder care attorney. You have to be prepared financially. So we had to look for a memory care facility. I did that for the first time this week. It was a nice facility, but the thought of leaving my guy there was extremely difficult. But I think back to what he said, make the plan, stop living like he's dying, live for today. So I will do my research. I will find the best place and I will put that aside. Every day I try to be ready for anything that might happen. Project Lifesaver is one of those things. It was a very easy no-brainer. If he starts to wander, and the very first time, he could get into trouble very quickly. I read too many stories of senior alerts where they wander off and they're found the next day or a couple of days later. I didn't want that to happen to my husband, so I don't have to worry about that. Project Lifesaver, it's a no-brainer. Work every day to find joy and to be happy. If you're happy, it makes you a better caregiver to your husband or your spouse. Hugs help. Occasionally now, he will say something I can't understand even one syllable of it, and I will say to him, "Mike, I don't understand what you're trying to tell me, but you're adorable," and hug him. I try, as I'm planning a course of action, I try to do what hurts my heart the least. Be strong. Keep putting one foot in front of the other. This is the hardest job on the planet. Just be strong.
So the mental health unit started about a year and a half ago. Since the beginning of it, nothing like it existed before. And so we kind of had to build it from the ground up. We've been building some traction over the last couple of years.
We mainly respond to active calls for service, which would include suicidal, homicidal, any kind of individual that's suffering from a mental health crisis. It's happening in the moment.
Once we get to those calls, we can assess the situation, see what that person is needing, what that individual needs. And that could mean getting our local mental health authority involved, try to coordinate safety plans with those clinicians, and then further beyond that, if that person needs more help, we can get them in touch with the local hospitals or even inpatient facilities if that's the need.
Our most important function, besides active calls, would be to provide resources to members of our community that may not know what they can do for individuals who they love that suffer from a mental health illness, or just to answer questions if they're not sure what's going on. We also provide other kinds of resources, connect them with our local mental health authorities or with shelter if they're having an issue with food, with all kinds of problems that may arise. We're really kind of a jack of all trades for the community.
So the way our unit functions, and I'll even go further and say our patrol officers, when they respond to a typical call that would be for somebody with Alzheimer's or dementia, it's going to start off as a wellness check.
A wellness check, or we also call it a welfare check, is just a call for service that anyone can do on anyone. When patrol or the mental health unit gets a welfare check, it's basically someone who cares for this individual, family member, loved one, friend, even doctors do a welfare check, and it's saying, hey, I believe that this person may need to be checked on.
That could mean they haven't heard from them in a while. They might start noticing that this family member is maybe having some jumbled thoughts, lost of memory, or a lot of times what we see is the individual may be wandering, and so they may leave the home or not return for quite a while.
Individuals with Alzheimer's dementia can have hallucinations, they can be confused, they can be decompensated physically. So the mental health unit is really about trying to connect them with care that they need.
A lot of times the relative doesn't maybe live in town, they live out of town, and so we really work on the back end to try and get those resources or that information so that way we can kind of network and talk to the family members and then try to get them on the same page.
So a really great resource, the number one that I always try to refer families to, is the Texas Department of Family Services, or what we refer to as Adult Protective Services. So when you hear of Adult Protective Services or Child Protective Services, you immediately think of abuse or neglect. But that's not all that that department offers. They will assign you someone to your case to investigate what that individual will need for assistance. So let's say there's an individual in the community that doesn't have family close by or doesn't have family in general. The Texas Department of Family Services will assist in making sure that that individual is cared for. They're not left on their own and they're not neglected.
Alzheimer's is, at least the way the state defines it, is a medical diagnosis, whereas a mental illness is a psychological mental health diagnosis. Something more along the lines of depression, anxiety, PTSD, those would be the mental health diagnosis. Alzheimer's, dementia would be the medical diagnosis. So kind of when we get those types of calls and we talk to family members, kind of explaining that process to them and getting them a more broader understanding of what law enforcement can do to assist and what other players are involved to help guide them into their treatment plan.
Another resource that we may refer families to is our local assisted living facilities. Individuals may need around-the-clock care that family just cannot provide. They're not home all the time, they're also working themselves, or an individual may be aggressive and non-med compliant. So an assisted living facility may assist with that person to make sure that they get the care that they need.
Our number one concern is the individual's health and safety. We want to respond and make sure that their quality of life is still okay. We're going to go through things as far as, do they have any medical diagnosis or other diagnosis other than the concern for Alzheimer's, dementia, and if they do, are they under a doctor's care, getting care for it? Are they taking medication like they're supposed to? The next thing we want to look into is, are they sleeping okay? Are they eating okay? Are the living conditions in the home okay? And if we can kind of determine that all those things are going as they should, we can always pass that on to the family and say, hey, look, we did our wellness check, everything's okay. Now, if there's concerns where maybe the individual is not caring for themselves anymore, poor quality of life, house is in disarray, or they're not eating well or sleeping well, then we can look in a little bit further, and as I mentioned before, start looking into notifying state services to get involved and help coordinate getting that person into a better living condition.
If they're not getting the care that they need at home, family members may want to talk to their attorney or their lawyer to see what would be the best course of action to make sure that this person is getting the care, whether that's a medical power of attorney or guardianship.
Guardianship would be, across the board. If somebody needs assistance or they need somebody to make decisions for them because they can no longer care for themselves, guardianship gives them the ability to do that. With medical power of attorney, that's more something that if somebody's incapacitated or they need somebody to make a medical decision for them on their behalf, that would apply.
If you call the police department, we go to almost all calls. Those calls that we would not respond to would mostly be things of a civil matter. So I'll give an example. Your loved one, you want them to go to the hospital. You think that they need to see a doctor, they need to be diagnosed with something. You really want to get them care. They're a legal age, they're an adult, we cannot make them go. That doesn't mean that we can't answer your questions. You care about that person, we can connect you with those resources. That doesn't mean that we need to go out and see your loved one to make them go. We can't make them go, but we're here to answer questions, so call us and we can figure it out together. What's that old saying? If you see something, say something. If you're concerned that a citizen could be in danger for themselves or for others, I would encourage you to call, because information is key. That's power. So if we can help an individual in need, then that's what we want to do. Tell your neighbors about the mental health unit. Tell them about what resources that the police department offers and the other resources in your community. Not only do we need to spread awareness for Alzheimer's and dementia, but just ending the stigma on mental health in general. Sometimes family members are not equipped to care for their loved ones at home. They may wander. We have a program with the police department called Project Lifesaver, which is for elderly individuals and for children that fit a certain criteria.
The Project Lifesaver started 22 years ago in Chesapeake, Virginia. It just basically involves putting a small transmitter about the size of a watch onto people that tend to wander, which would be Alzheimer's patients, dementia patients, some kiddos with autism. If you go on to nbtexas.org and under the police department, you can go to the Get Involved tab, and it has a little application. You have to have a 24-hour caregiver. You'd be diagnosed with something, Alzheimer's, autism, dementia. Anybody that might wander, once they fill that application out, somebody will give them a call, probably me, and we talk about what their needs are, and they'll go more in detail on their loved one that needs the transmitter. What they like, what they don't like. Are they going to be scared of lights and siren, or do they like police? Do they hate police? Do they, all the things that's real important, and especially with Alzheimer's patients, where they worked, what they did 20 years, 30 years ago. Because the significant part of the time that somebody wanders that has Alzheimer's or dementia, they're going back to work. We have, and it's time and time again when we ask why they want the program or want to be involved with the program, it's always the same thing. Well, they just got up one morning and wandered off, and when we ask them where they were going, well, I was going to work, or I was going to school, or I was going wherever they did in the past. Then we're going to come out, or they'll come to the police department, and we'll put out a little band, and it can go on their ankle or on their wrist, and it's emitting a radio frequency chirp, or each individual has their own individual radio frequency. And that's how we were able to track them, because we have the receiver, we punched in their frequency number, and we can come to their location, wherever they were last seen at, and start tracking them from there. There is maintenance involved with this, and it's done at the police department, or we can come to the house, depending on circumstances. But all the maintenance is changing out the battery once a month or once every 60 days. The caregiver will get a small black box that has a little red light on it, and it lights up every time the transmitter sends a signal out. And basically that's just telling us that it's still working, the battery's still working, nothing happened to it overnight, it didn't get water inside of it or anything. And they got to do that once a day. Every single day, we give them a check sheet to check off each day that they've done it in the morning. It doesn't make any difference morning, night, whenever they want to do it, whatever convenient to them, but just check it every day, because they're the ones that's going to be able to tell if it's not working. Once they do that, the only other thing that we really request them to do, as soon as somebody goes missing, they have to call 911. They have to get everybody en route, because when you call 911 and tell them they're part of the Project Lifesaver program, that does two things. One, it automatically sends patrol units that are already on the street to the location. They'll get with their caregiver and find out more information, but in the meantime, you're going to have other units that are going to be roaming around the area looking for this person. And then also they're going to call one of us, and we'll come out with the equipment and start looking too. So it's just imperative that we get them to call as soon as they find out they're missing. An average person roughly walks 4 miles an hour, so you can make some good time if you don't call immediately. We've been able to keep the cost free for our clients. And the reason that is because we've pretty much been sponsored by the New Braunfels Police Academy Alumni Association. We've also received several donations from other entities like the Police Officers Association and the New Braunfels Fire Department Association, Noon Lions Club, and the New Braunfels Kiwanis Club. So Project Lifesaver, because you have the band and the frequency and the transmitter, you can go anywhere in the United States that has a Project Lifesaver program. So a lot of people go down to Orlando, or we've had people come here and they were up in Austin. Project Lifesaver uses the radio frequency mainly because it's been around forever. It's tried and true. You just can't go wrong with it. It's our end of it. What we found from our clients is that GPS, a lot of times you have to have a watch or something that needs to be charged every 4 or 5 days, as opposed to us changing a battery once every month or 2 months. GPS units usually require you to take it off to charge it. And again, we don't want to take anything off, because once you have it on them and they forget about it, you want to have them on there 24/7. The biggest thing a lot of times is cost. This isn't costing anything for the client for us to change the battery out and put one on and put a transmitter on their loved one. GPS is going to cost something. You're going to have, just like a cell phone or whatever. A lot of people, well, my cell phone can track me. That's great, but a lot of times you don't want somebody that has autism or Alzheimer's or dementia to have a cell phone. They don't know how to function it. They might call 911 all day long. It's a lot of times it doesn't work. So having a very simplistic, simple band that we put on somebody that emits their own radio frequency works a lot better. The scenario of somebody actually getting the band off every once in a while happens. One family that we had enrolled, she found out the night before that her child had taken off the band, and she didn't call us that night. And wouldn't you know, the very next morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, she hears the front door open. So she heard the door open, and she goes outside and can't find him. And she didn't have the band. She knew he'd already lost it. So she immediately calls the police department. He was actually in the house. We don't know why he opened the door and closed, but he kind of hid back in the house. So we went out there to locate the transmitter, and everybody figured it would be in his room. Well, it wasn't in the room. It was through the master bedroom, into the master bathroom, in the bathtub, underneath a washcloth in the bathtub. Still had the band on. He was able to slide his hand out of it, and we were able to locate it that way. But when we located it, we looked at Mom, and she started crying. And I was like, why, you know, your child's at school like he should be. We just found the band. It's no harm, no foul. And she's like, no, you don't understand. That means this works. Every time we talk about it, everybody says it just gives them peace of mind. Peace of mind to the family and the caregiver, and I really think it gives peace of mind. I actually know it does to some of our Alzheimer's patients. They still know what it's for and what we're going to do if they happen to go missing, and that actually comforts them.
For more information about Project Lifesaver, or to learn more about the mental health unit of the New Braunfels Police Department, visit nbtexas.org.